McGraw-Hill Education presents The Lenovo Way, Managing a Diverse Global Company for Optimal Performance, written by Gina Qiao and Yolanda Conyers. Narration provided by Eli Woods and Company Productions. Foreword by Liu Chuanchu, founder and former chairman, Lenovo. On this, the 30th anniversary of the founding of our company, I am humbled to be able to present this book, The Lenovo Way, to the world. Outside of China, many people still don't know who we are or what we have overcome. They don't know anything about how we achieved the seemingly impossible and became the #1 selling PC brand in the world today. The answer lies in our people. Our story goes beyond our business to demonstrate just how far a diverse group of people from all corners of the world can come together in mutual understanding if they persist, if the will is there. And who better to talk about our journey of assimilating vastly different cultures than Gina Qiao and Yolanda Conyers, the two executives whose roles in human resources cut across all of our key business functions at all levels, and who were at the heart of our transition to a truly global enterprise. Gina and Yolanda are true insiders. Neither of these women was with the company from the very beginning, when we operated out of that dusty old guard shack, but they each played a critical role at a critical point in our rebirth. Both Gina and Yolanda were engaged at the most crucial time in our history, which they write about with such balance and clear-sightedness. Gina, a Chinese woman who grew up in our organization, and Yolanda, an American woman who has experienced Western corporate culture, are a perfect complement. These two women formed a deep friendship, but not without first struggling to understand each other's intentions, keeping an open mind, and finally learning and bettering each other. In many ways, Gina and Yolanda are a microcosm of who we at Lenovo are as a culture, and who we strive to be. Gina is a perfect example of our growth and development trajectory. From modest beginnings, she raised herself to the next level and then the next. She entered on her own merits, humbly, starting at the bottom by working in the secretarial pool. As I recall, her performance in that role was somewhat mediocre. It did not play to her strengths. But her diligence and her willingness to try anything soon distinguished her as one of our most outstanding employees. Gina is an example of someone who works hard and steadily, and she slowly but surely grabbed my attention. She played an instrumental part in the negotiations for the acquisition of IBM's PC division, and she helped in the early stages of our integration, even going so far as to transfer to our U.S. offices in Raleigh, North Carolina, with her family. She understood how important it was to learn English, to come to grips with a brand new way of doing things, and to assimilate with the newest members of the Lenovo family. Yolanda, along with Gina, was instrumental in furthering that integration, blending into our unique culture and helping us to understand, distill, and leverage the best practices of all members of the Lenovo team. I will never forget the day I first met this bright and enthusiastic professional face-to-face in Raleigh. Things had reached a turning point, and we still had not seen the level of success in defining our true core values that we were looking for. We spoke for hours. I challenged her about all the culture work we had been doing so far, and what struck me was her openness and her willingness to dig deep and to get to the roots of the issues. She did not just cling to the easy answers. During our many subsequent conversations, I learned that Yolanda, like Gina, had come from modest beginnings and had worked her way up through the executive ranks, achieving many milestones as a woman executive and as an African-American executive. She achieved academic honors from grade school to graduate school. She was inspired by her father, who had an innate curiosity about other cultures and who took risks, traveling around the world while developing and growing in his line of work, a path that Yolanda herself has followed. As Gina and Yolanda will both describe on these next pages, our explosion onto the world stage may seem swift to some, and yet nothing about our journey to globalization has been easy. In fact, That was not my vision. In the beginning, all I wanted was to create a small company that could produce something useful for people. When we first started all those years ago, there was no infrastructure, understanding, or support for doing business in China. Where we are today was unimaginable at the time, and, to be honest, I was not that ambitious. I simply wanted to develop my understanding of management philosophy and leverage the strengths of our people. As agents for American computer brands, we learned from our Western partners. As the Chinese market opened up for businesses like ours, we gradually developed something like a vision to dominate China's consumer market, and it was only after we achieved that goal that we considered the world beyond. Along the way, we faced many setbacks, but it is in our DNA to persevere and to fight. Aside from our determination and belief that our goal could be reached, we also developed a very specific methodology. At Lenovo, we use a phasing approach, meaning that whenever we try to approach a target or objective, we try to break down that process into stages, setting benchmarks and targets for each. Before we set targets for individual periods or stages, we think thoroughly about the different links and connections in that process, and we will leave no stone unturned when it comes to the details. Once a target is set, we will spare no efforts in getting to it, and that is how we got here, step by step, thinking, analyzing, and correcting course whenever necessary. Of course, you have to bring the people with you. All that we are today would not have been possible without the incredible resources of our team. The Lenovo Way is, above all, a book about what we are capable of as human beings when we can align behind the same goals. It's a timely lesson, a blueprint for how individuals, businesses, communities, and even governments can move past cultural frictions to gain deeper insights into one another's intentions. Through our example, we can also show that there is a way for China and the rest of the world to work together and bring together our respective competencies and strengths to achieve a winning scenario. We have heard from leaders of many different countries that they want to work together and that the growth of one economy is beneficial for the health of the other. Achieving this win-win reality would be good not just for the global economy, but for humankind. It is up to companies and average people like us to realize this aspiration. Simply put, when we learn how to get along and learn from each other, there are no limits. Foreword by Yang Yuan Chun, Chairman and CEO, Lenovo. At Lenovo, we have always taken a unique approach to running our business. Therefore, it is appropriate that the authors of this book, Gina Qiao and Yolanda Conyers, are presenting you with a very different kind of business book. The Lenovo Way is not the usual how-to manual. Our story of innovation and success is unlike any other, and our globalization journey could not have happened had we followed the rules of a conventional playbook. Instead, what you will find in these next chapters is a series of stories concerning the evolution of our company that focus on how a diverse group of people at Lenovo set aside their egos and their pride to put the interests of the company first, learning how to engage in environments and cultures that were completely unfamiliar to them in order to drive business results. These are real-life examples of how to build a multinational culture. Many international mergers and acquisitions have not succeeded because their people ultimately failed to adapt. Our willingness to acknowledge what we did not know and start from zero was our secret ingredient. We worked together to set up an entirely new cultural framework that would take us to new heights of achievement. Personally, I could not be more proud of how far we have come. I joined Lenovo back when it was still called Legend, soon after completing my graduate degree in computer science management at the University of Science and Technology of China in 1989. I had an internship back when we were just a startup, and I was immediately attracted to the company's vision and energy. In the beginning, I was just the salesperson for foreign brand workstations and peripherals. 2 years later, I was chosen to manage that business, and we grew by 10 times in 2.5 years. Our founder, Chairman Liu, asked me to lead our self-branded PC business in 1994, and we became the #1 PC brand in China 3 years later. Our ability to fully leverage our manufacturing and operations gave us the advantage over international brands, and so did the skills and diligence of our people. One of those people was Gina Qiao, my neighbor in our company housing complex, whom I used to see every day on the shuttle bus to work. When I ran the PC business at Lenovo, Gina was responsible for PR and marketing in our home and education division. I had heard about some of her pioneering ideas for interacting with customers, her work in creating in-house journals to promote our products, and how well she ran our customer club. I was so impressed with her work that when we merged divisions, I made sure that she was on my team, and this outstanding leader, who is now a member of our Lenovo Executive Committee, has been standing beside me ever since. After Lenovo began its globalization journey, she was one of the first senior executives to explore the world outside of China. She has lived and worked in Singapore, New York, and Raleigh, working in HR and strategic planning and playing a crucial role as Lenovo created its global culture. Another asset has been Yolanda Conyers. I first met Yolanda when I interviewed her for the job of our first diversity officer. I was impressed that a world-class veteran executive with more than 15 years' experience was attracted to Lenovo for such an important role. When I asked her how she would define diversity for Lenovo, what struck me about Yolanda's answers was that she was humble. She told me that although she had previously managed global teams in diversity, she knew that she needed to learn about the Chinese culture, and she made a commitment to dive deeply into who we were as a people, so that she could help our leadership team come up with the best strategies for East-West integration. I knew immediately that she would be a great fit for Lenovo. In a story that is parallel to Gina's moving from the East to work in the United States, Yolanda was among the first Western executives to move to China, demonstrating her desire to learn the history of our company and our culture. This move served her well. She began to develop deep relationships in China and to earn the respect of her Eastern colleagues. During her tenure with us, she has been a role model in demonstrating the Lenovo Way, showing ownership and commitment. Both Gina and Yolanda live up to and embody my requirements for all leaders at Lenovo, including myself: ownership, a learning attitude, and persistence. Ownership means that when you feel like an owner, you do things differently. You put the company first rather than your own personal interests. You set targets for yourself rather than being assigned tasks by your boss, and you always try your best to deliver good results without pressure from anybody else. A learning attitude is a willingness to try new things and new ideas and to practice improving every day. Everyone can learn, be it from books like this, consultants, coaches, colleagues, or competitors, or simply from your own experience. Through all of this, you need a persistent spirit. It's easy to set ambitious goals, but only a very few succeed in achieving them. Why? Because it is hard to be persistent. When one path is not working, though, always look for another path. That's how you can exceed expectations and go beyond the targets you set. I often think of this leadership model as a tree. Ownership is the roots, learning the leaf, and persistence the trunk. If you do all these things, the tree will grow very fast. And now, Lenovo has become a tree full of green leaves, new ideas, and innovations. Our tree is planted solidly in the ground with the deep root system of our pride and passion for this company. Its trunk grows tall through persistence and our will to succeed, with branches that span continents across the globe. The timing could not be more right for this book on many levels. 10 years ago, we transformed Lenovo with a groundbreaking move, the acquisition of IBM's PC division. Since then, we have created one of the world's leading technology companies. That acquisition has clearly been a complete success. Now we are about to transform the company again with a bold expansion into smartphones and servers through deals that are even bigger than the PC acquisition. As we undergo an even more monumental transformation in order to adapt and integrate yet more diverse teams, the Lenovo Way offers the blueprint, reminding us of what we did right and where we have gone wrong. Looking back and analyzing the past in detail helps us to learn for the future. So read this book and learn how we came this far so that whatever your industry or enterprise, you can begin to grow your own tree. Yolanda's story, Gateway to China. I just returned to my home in Austin, Texas after yet another long-haul flight from Beijing, and I was thrilled to be back in the warm embrace of my husband, Chris, and my 2 younger sons, Cameron and Colton. The 3 previous months had been a whirlwind of meetings in Asia that left me in a seemingly permanent state of jet lag. Ever since I first joined Lenovo, I'd been on a steep learning curve that was as exhausting as it was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating, and I couldn't wait to see what would happen next. After its acquisition of IBM's PC division in 2005, it was clear that Lenovo was serious about being a global company. In my entire career, I'd never encountered a more diverse and multicultural group of leaders, and I was inspired. Lenovo was doing its best to walk the talk and become a truly global enterprise. As the company's first-ever diversity officer, and by the way, Lenovo was the first Chinese company to ever have a diversity officer, much less an African-American woman, I had to somehow make this work. I had to figure out how to align everyone behind a common goal while respecting everyone's differences. From language barriers to completely different styles of doing business, we faced enormous challenges before we could even hope to blend seamlessly into one inclusive corporate culture. It was daunting, to be sure, but having learned the value of committing to a job head, heart, and soul, I felt confident. Or at least I did until I heard that I was losing favor with my colleagues in China. I quickly called Crystal Arrington, who was then our HR chief of staff, to get more clarity concerning what I had heard. Yolanda, what I have heard is that your communication style is offensive. It is too direct and authoritative. Our Chinese colleagues are struggling with you, she said. That struck me as an odd thing to say. I'd just returned from a trip to Beijing, and the meetings seemed to have gone well. We'd covered a lot of ground, there had been no complaints, and we'd seemed to be making some progress. What could possibly have gone wrong in the 24 hours since I'd boarded my plane back to the United States? I was flabbergasted. We were all still in that getting-to-know-you phase, but I'd always prided myself on my cultural sensitivity. I'd never had this kind of negative feedback before. At Dell, my previous employer, I'd won awards and accolades for my work in leading globally diverse teams. I was the first African-American female Dell had hired as a software engineer in product development, and I'd risen through the company's executive ranks based in large part on my ability to work with all types of people and get the job done. Growing up in Port Arthur, Texas, I was raised by a mother and father who taught me to be curious about the world outside our 4 corners. My dad had worked his way up to be a chief steward on a merchant ship and spent his life sailing around the world, regaling us with stories whenever he was home on leave. Even as a schoolgirl, when I was bused to an integrated school, I applied this open-mindedness, befriending classmates whose backgrounds were different from my own. I even caught hell for this sometimes when I was hanging out with African-American friends. I recalled being accused of acting white, of communicating too proper, meaning with less of my cultural slang, and of being too interested in doing things that people of my color just don't do. My response? I continued on my path, knowing that there was a bigger, broader world out there. My passion for diversity started very young. It was in my blood. I knew what it was like to be an outsider among my colleagues, and I wanted nothing more than to create a climate in which everyone could feel that he or she had a voice and a place at the table. At Lenovo, we had to mesh a large number of distinct cultural threads together into one strong fabric. The success of the acquisition and Lenovo's entire future as a global company depended on this. However, my Chinese colleagues were viewing me as part of the problem that I'd been hired to fix. Somehow, as I was interviewing all the leaders and staff members one by one, trying to gain an understanding of how everyone would like to work together and to get to the bottom of the many cultural clashes that people were having, I had rubbed people the wrong way. To back up a bit, Lenovo had been in the process of transforming itself from a completely homogeneous Chinese organization before the 2005 acquisition to a corporate and cultural mosaic, with employees from more than 50 countries in the space of just 2 years. After bursting onto the global stage, Lenovo's top leaders had wisely concluded that the company needed to hire people who had experience in multinational corporations. They needed people who knew how to operate in the overseas markets that Lenovo hoped to conquer in order to enable the company to become a world leader in the high-tech industry. But the result was 3 distinct cultures that didn't gel. We called them the 3 rivers, referring to Lenovo, IBM, and Dell, the corporate backgrounds of the majority of our employees. We needed to figure out a way to get the 3 to flow together as one powerful stream. It was bad enough that people outside the company were gunning for us. Therein lay my diversity challenge. At the time of the acquisition, naysayers predicted failure. There was also some resentment and fear that a Chinese company had acquired an American icon, but the public did not know what we had planned. Usually, when a foreign company takes over another business, the acquired company gets absorbed into the national culture of the acquirer's headquarters. This isn't always the best way to do things, but it's the easiest way. For years, the Koreans and the Japanese did business according to their own customs, even when they were operating on North American shores. That's how most global companies have operated, with the culture of their company's home base calling all the shots. Lenovo was trying to do something truly bold. Our chairman at the inception of the acquisition, Yang Yuan-chun, insisted on fully integrating all of us. Putting himself at a tactical disadvantage in the short term, he personally dedicated himself to learning both Eastern and Western best practices in business. The intention was to leverage the strengths and styles from all the cultures, Eastern and Western, to create a world-class global enterprise. Our leaders wanted nothing less than to reconstruct Lenovo's entire cultural DNA. They wanted to create a new way of thinking inside one unified Lenovo company. It was pure genius, and I was relishing the opportunity to try something that had never been done before. This was our chance to be real change agents and prove to the world what could be accomplished in a culture of inclusiveness, compromise, and understanding. Until then, most leaders in my field had focused only on the compliance aspect of diversity, adhering to government regulations concerning demographics and making sure that women and minorities in the workplace felt mentored and had equal employment opportunities. At Lenovo, we were redefining diversity as something that was much more global and effective as a business strategy. We went beyond the statistical compliance level of diversity. We wanted to integrate the diverse cultural experiences and points of view of all our employees, starting at the very top with our executive committee, to create something trailblazing that would drive business results. This was different and this was deep. But at this point, it was all just a little too new. I'd been thrown into the middle of things at a time when everyone, American, European, and Asian, was feeling vulnerable. At various meetings, it was the first time I'd seen white Western men in the minority. Yet the Chinese employees were feeling overrun by the Western newcomers and by English as the dominant language. We were all out of our element, being forced to question styles of doing business that we'd taken for granted throughout our careers. We all had a new language to learn, and I was no exception. Outside of various interviews, working groups, and meetings, I hadn't really gotten to know any of my Chinese colleagues on a personal enough level to ask them what the problem was. But Gina Qiao stood out. She hadn't been that forthcoming in the various group settings in which we'd met. In fact, at the first executive committee meeting in Beijing, when McKinsey consultants had shared the results of a cultural audit to identify strengths and opportunities for improvement in our new combined work culture, Gina barely spoke. But something told me that she'd be sympathetic, I had also found that the few times we'd talked, she was always very kind, with lots of warmth and sincerity in her smile. I called to ask her if she'd have dinner with me, and she seemed eager to accept my invitation. We were all staying at the Grand Hyatt Hotel in the Wan Chai district of Hong Kong, a spectacular location right on one of the busiest harbors in the world. There was a restaurant on the mezzanine floor of the resplendent marble lobby, with cathedral walls of glass that revealed the surrounding skyline and mountain views. We found a quiet table for two. Gina hadn't been spending that much time in the Beijing office since I joined because she was working in Singapore, running HR for the Asia-Pacific region and supporting the president and general manager of Asia-Pacific. But she was beloved and trusted by her colleagues in China, and she was far enough removed from the situation in my department that she could hear both sides without bias. She had a down-to-earth, humble demeanor that belied just how powerful and influential she was within the organization, with a deep knowledge of the Lenovo culture that dated back to the company's earliest years. In retrospect, she was the perfect person from whom to seek advice. "First of all, Yolanda, I think you are a very nice person," Gina began. "It's obvious to me that you are kind and that your intentions are good. But from what people are telling me, that is not coming across to our Chinese colleagues at all. In fact, they find you too aggressive. They say that you are overbearing and that when you ask them a question, you act as if you already know the answer. You don't listen." Her words hurt because they were true. I flashed back to all those conversations that I'd been having with my Chinese colleagues and realized for the first time that I'd been the one doing most of the talking. I was so passionate about this work. I had so many ideas about how we would create a new model for global diversity, and I'd been enthusiastically sharing those thoughts with my new colleagues. But I must have come across like a bulldozer. Gina had plenty of advice to offer, all of it helpful, and I wished I'd heard it earlier. It was the kind of thing that Westerners doing business in China should write down and keep in a wallet for easy reference to help them navigate the complex sensitivities of a culture that is so different from their own. Tips that I will share on these next pages. But mostly, what I learned was the importance of making face-to-face connections. Relationships, or what the Chinese call guanxi, are integral to doing business in the East, but they take work. I had known how serious relationships are in the Chinese culture, and I had traveled to China once before for my previous employer. But this was truly the first time I had been in a position where the success of my work was heavily dependent on deep cultural understanding. You first have to show up, meet people where they are, be present, and listen. I told Gina all about my history, explaining that as an African American and a woman, I had had to fight hard to be heard and to take my place at the table. I wasn't making excuses. I was just trying to help her know what was in my heart and understand my intentions. As we were talking, it dawned on me that the assertiveness that had worked so well for me in the United States had backfired in China because there was no context for it. Most Chinese didn't see me as a black person and a woman. They simply saw me as an American, a foreigner. Not many would have been aware of my ancestors' history of slavery and oppression. Most had no idea. When I told Gina, she was fascinated and eager to learn more. We talked for hours. By then, it was nighttime, and Hong Kong's legendary harbor was twinkling like a Christmas tree festooned with bright neon lights. As I watched yachts, ferries, and freighters speed by in the busy waterways, it occurred to me that Gina and I could not have picked a more appropriate spot for our conversation. This cosmopolitan territory, a former British colony on the southeastern coast of China, had long been called the Gateway to China, and that's exactly where I was at that point in my life and career. Together, Gina and I stood on the threshold of momentous change for Lenovo, for ourselves and for our families. Our budding relationship was the very embodiment of East meets West. There could not have been a more fitting start to our adventure. Gina's story, Merging Cultures. When Yolanda first asked me for advice about Chinese culture, I wasn't sure how honest I should be. Although I'd been working out of the office in Singapore, I'd heard the feedback and I didn't want to upset her. But I also wished that there was someone who could give me advice because I was...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?